But first, and before we nail the guilty, the people most responsible for this disaster of a second wave of infections, a couple of very interesting insights into the coronavirus today, into how we've responded and the cost of this panic. And I kind of get this panic in a way, because it's the way that the deaths are read out every day, even the deaths of people in the 80s and 90s in nursing homes. Here's Victoria's Premier doing the death toll today.
1 female in their 50s, 2 males in their 70s, 2 females in their 80s, 2 males in their 80s, and 1 male in their 90s.
And 4 of those deaths in nursing homes. There was another death today too, a woman in her 80s in New South Wales. Now, I lost my father last year in a nursing home. It was expected, such deaths often are. But yet I still found it very tough. So I feel very much for the families of all the dead. It's an awful time for them. But my father's death wasn't then announced by a premier the next day, along with all the others who died in nursing homes or wherever. And on that point, a viewer sent me a health update sent by the Federal Health Department on the flu. I sent it last month. And this update said that of the nearly 21,000 people tested up to that point with the flu, 36 Australians had died from it. That's 36 deaths this year from the flu as of a month ago, and we didn't hear of any of them. And you never do, in fact. 3 years ago, the flu killed 1,200 Australians. Did anyone read out the list of the dead each day? 1,200. Now think of the flu. You would consider the flu a lot more seriously, maybe, if our leaders held a press conference for every death. You'd get extremely scared. And you'd be demanding actions and masks and bans and more safety in nursing homes. That actually is something that we probably should be doing now. And about these figures, these flu figures, flu deaths are actually way down this year. It seems that the bans and the social distancing rules we've got for the coronavirus have also cut flu deaths by hundreds and hundreds. Actually, it makes me wonder how many of these coronavirus deaths might in fact be the flu deaths. I mean, I'm sure it's not many, but I'd like to know. Anyway, we've now got these bans for the coronavirus, terrible bans that have thrown up to 1 million more Australians out of work and caused so much distress. But today, some good news on that unemployment front. The latest figures show a bounce back in July. Well, probably more a crawl back. More than 100,000 new jobs have been created, although most of them part-time. Hours worked also up slightly, 1.3%. This is good, better than expected, although the unemployment rate still did go up a fraction to 7.5% because more people decided to join the workforce. And it still leaves us with 1 million people on the dole. But now, have a look at where the worst unemployment is. It's actually in the states that shut their borders to cheers and hosannas, particularly Queensland, South Australia and Western Australia. Tasmania's the exception. Queensland, the worst rate, 8.8%. And I'm not surprised. It did destroy its own tourism industry with those bans. Western Australia, 8.3%. Worse than New South Wales and Victoria, although Victoria will go backwards in next month's figures for sure. But look at the ACT bubble, the Canberra bubble. That's the home of so many public servants there. Unemployment just 4.6%, the lowest. It seems that public servants aren't really feeling the pain, are they? And in fact, many of the people making most of the decisions about these terrible bans are public servants or paid by taxpayers like politicians, and many of them in the city, Canberra, that's suffering least from the bans they recommend or administer. More promising news today from Victoria, the lowest number of new infections in 3 weeks, 278. In New South Wales, it's 12. By the way, in New Zealand, the number of community infections has now gone to 13 So much for New Zealand having eliminated the virus. The suspicions are that it got back in the country through refrigerated goods sent to a warehouse, flown in from who knows where. Not from Australia, says the company, not from Victoria. Victoria. But let us now speak of Victoria and hold some people to account.